acting are very closely tied. The whole point is to have an idea and get across it a listener, whether it is one person or 5,000 in the hall. A very warm welcome to each and everyone. I, Vani Krishna, finally a student of CSI Institute of Legal Studies and an intern at LJRF, takes this opportunity to welcome you all for today's session. Today, we will be dealing with the topic career in law firms, all that you need to know. And we have with us Advocate Sandeep Srikumar of Mullah and Mullah, Craigie Blunt and Carroll as our valuable speaker. We also have three members of LGRF, Anu Anna Bepi, Anupam Aisha, and Arya Vinaya, who have been selected for doing internship at a prestigious institution like Mullah and Mullah, Craigie Blunt and Carroll, which adds to the glory of the session. I request the participants to switch on your cameras and mute your mic. And in case of any queries, please drop it in the chat box. A smile is considered to be a universal welcome. Now, I would like to invite Jarani of Srinarayana Law College, Putota, Ernakulam, to do the welcome address. Over to you, Jarani.
Thank you, Vani. Good evening, all. The expert in anything was once a beginner. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar on the topic Career in Law Firms. Let me introduce and welcome the resource person of today's webinar, Advocate Sandeep Srikumar, Senior Associate at Mullah and Mullah, Craigie Blunt and Carroll, who is specialized in food laws, legal metrology, drugs and cosmetics, insurance, insolvency, arbitration, and employment. It's a gracious pleasure to have you here. Welcome, sir. Now, I heartily welcome General Convener Advocate Nilima Ma'am, coordinator of today's webinar, Mr. Sanish Kedi, LGRF member and guide, Safi Mohan, sir. I would also like to welcome Anu Anna Bepi, Marcus Law College, Kozhikode, Anupam Aisha, Government Law College, Kozhikode, Arya V. Nair, Government Law College, Trivandrum, who got internship at Mullah and Mullah Associates. A warm welcome to coordinators and all members of LGRF 30 days internship program for LLB students and all the participants in the webinar. Welcome everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jarani. Thank you, Jarani, for your warm welcoming. Moving on, we all have been curious about our career. What next is a question that always pop on our mind. We have with this Advocate Sandeep Srikumar to enlighten us on the topic careers in law firm, all that you need to know. He's a person who needs no introduction. Graduated from Kerala Law Academy, started as an associate in Mullah and Mullah, Craigie Blunt and Carroll, was a legal manager at Britannia Industries Limited, and currently is a senior associate in Mullah and Mullah, Craigie Blunt and Carroll. He specializes in food laws, legal metrology, drugs and cosmetics, insurance, insolvency, arbitration, and employment. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for wonderful introduction. And thank you for allowing me to speak to this wonderful bunch of aspiring lawyers. It's a privilege. It's an honor. Thank you so much. Today, I am asked to speak about career in law firms. All that you need to know. The topic implies that it should be an interactive session because it's about what you need to know. So you have to ask me. So I would request everyone to switch on their video if they can, so that we have a more productive session. But it's left to you. Now, my endeavor all throughout this presentation, what I'm attempting is to give you an insight about how law firms work. When I talk about law firms, what I am speaking to you is about top law firms in the country. Basically, a full service law firm which can operate all throughout India and have offices at major locations across India. So these are the type of law firms basically structured on English model of law firms which I am talking, which I would like to tell you on this presentation. Now, you must have already interned with law firms over here in Kerala, but I am not very sure that if you have right kind of exposure in law firms in Mumbai, Bangalore, or in Delhi. So over here, uh, what I would like to briefly tell you is the work culture in these law firms in Mumbai and Delhi, and how these law firms are structured, and what is the compensation that you can expect from these law firms once you get into these law firms. And the more important thing is how to get into these law firms. So I will be giving you tips for that as well. So I think this topic is important to those who are confused. Basically, at the once you pass out from like the same confusion I had when I was a final year student. The confusion was that I want to practice law. I love the profession, but when I get into this profession, the initial days are really struggling because there is literally no returns at your first stage of your career. In fact, I think that is what prevents many of us from practicing law, though they love the profession. So probably for those who are the same confusion like me, who had when I was a final year student, so probably law firms could be an answer or a solution to your confusion. Probably it's a place where you could earn, at the same time you could learn and practice law. So probably that kind of exposure you won't get in if you work in a typical law firm in Kerala. But if you try to get into these law firms, which is not so easy, but it's like if you try, you can get into. If you can get into these type of law firms, probably this would help you to remain in the practice of law. And it would help you to flourish in law at a later point in time without getting into initial struggle in terms of monetary advantage. So first, that's why I've structured my presentation today in a manner where, let's start with what these law firms has to offer you. If you get into a law firm in Mumbai or Delhi, what these law firms could offer you in terms of compensation, probably I believe that would help you to understand the seriousness about this topic, probably would encourage you to sit and listen to me till the end of this session. So let me start with, I have prepared a small presentation. I'm little bit unprepared, but whatever time I got, I have prepared a presentation so that, I could take through the slides, so that it would be easy for me to convey the information what I had. And all this jotted down over this presentation is basically from my experience. So what I'm convinced of, I have put down in this slide so that I can take each one of you around to give you a broader perspective of or a bird's eye view about how a law firm, how the law firm structure is, how the compensation and all that. Let me take you to the presentation. Yes. So, first of all, this is what let me just introduce you to the different positions in a law firm once you get into a law firm. That typically when you join in a law firm, you would be joining as an associate. So you have to typically in a law firm, you have to continue 0 to 5 years. It's not a standard thing that, you will be joining as an associate and you'll be remaining as an associate for about 5 years initially. So once you join as an associate in a law firm, this is a figure I have taken from 2016 survey, which has done by one legal league consulting, which I can confirm from my experience that it's a true figures. The figures have a little bit increased in 2021, but generally the standard of compensation which law firms offer in Mumbai and Delhi are in this range. So an associate, once you join as an associate in a law firm, the package which they offer in a law firm is around 12 lakhs. That's fresher, that right from the college, without any experience. Once you join in a law firm in Mumbai or in Delhi, that you will be getting around 1 lakh per month as a retention fees, like retainership fees, they call it, because as an advocate, you are not entitled to get salary. So this I have provided that in an associate, you will get 9 to 25 in your span of 1 to 5 years in Mumbai. And if you get into a tier 2 law firms, I have split the law firms as tier 1 and tier 2, because tier 1 law firms are like a few handful of law firms, about like 5 to 10 law firms across India, which are difficult to get in, full service law firms. And there are other law firms which are equally good and competitive, but their salary package is a bit less. So I've structured law firms, the packages into two, like tier 1 and tier 2. So if you end up in a tier 2 law firm, what you would generally could expect is from 7 to 16 lakhs. That means little over 50,000 you can right away earn. That's what the importance I told you, that, initially if you practice in Kerala, probably you will not earn any returns. Probably, you could practice law, but, it's a strugglesome period when you don't have any monetary, you have to rely on your parents for your income. So probably you can, over here, you can practice law at the same time, earn a handsome salary like this. Now, there are different positions in law firm. Like if you see a senior associate, the second designation after associate, you will be promoted as a senior associate. Then senior associate, if you work in a tier 1 law firm, you could earn anywhere between 22 to 60 lakhs per annum. And in a tier 2 law firms, it is around like 16 to 30 lakhs that you would get. And this third tier of promotion that you will get in a law firm is like a principal associate, counsel, managing associate, and so on, which like if you finish 8 to 12 years of experience. But not necessary that every law firm has this tier. So in some law firms like me, which I am working, that we have only 3 tiers: associate, senior associate, and then partner. So see the salary scale around 55 to 75 lakhs that you will be earning per annum, and 28 to 45 lakhs if you end up in a tier 2 law firm. And 10 plus year, believe me, you'll be earning around 10 lakhs per month once you put in 10 years in a law firm. So these kind of salaries, I'm sure that many of us are not, like many of the students from Kerala are not privy to, because I can't see the scarcity in applications which we get in law firm, because I also sometimes sit and shortlist the CV for my recruitment, but hardly I could find any CV from the law colleges from Kerala. So probably I believe that it is because of ignorance, that people don't know what is the compensation that one could get in terms, like, it is not necessary, because law firm is always a struggle. Like that we'll deal with in a later point in time. But initially the stage when you learn in a law firm that you can put in 5 years, and after that you feel that I should now do an independent practice. Probably after putting in so much of years, you would get your base to start your practice, and you would have your own clientele little bit. You would know about law, how to handle a client, and all you would learn. So that initial struggle, certainly I think if you get into a law firm, you can avoid. That is my assurance. Now, next I would just go through, this is not all about. Now, just let me go through that. If you get into a law firm, how the structure of law firm looks like. Generally in Kerala, if you get into, advocates collective doing litigation, basically they will be arguing matters in court at different levels. So there may be teams, one team for dealing with administrative matters, one deal with DRT matters, one in high court, lower courts, and all. But when you get into a full-size law firm, the teams are not like that. Teams are entirely different. So there may be, you will find a whole lot of lawyers sitting and not attending the court at all. That they may not be required to go to court and present their case. They will be sitting at and advising clients on each transactions, deal structuring, and all those things. That's what I have listed down. The different departments in
Fida, please switch off your mic, please.
These are the different departments you could find in a law firm. Like, for example, I will just generally give a brief overview of how the structure functions, so that you will get. For example, if you get into a law firm and you are putting, you are put into banking and finance team. So you may not be required at that time to go to the court and argue matters. You will be purely looking after banking and finance matters. So banking and finance, what you would do in a banking and finance matter, as you would know, if you go to a law firm over here, probably you will, the banking means that you would be looking after loan documents, like mortgage documents, or you will be attending debt recovery tribunal proceedings and all. That's what the exposure you may get in Kerala. But if you go into a typical top tier law firm in Mumbai or Delhi in banking and finance, if you get into such a team, what you will get to do in such kind of is a high-end transactions, like, for example, syndicated loan transaction. For example, if there is a big project is funded, like if there is a 2,000 crore funding coming from a particular bank, then there is a syndicated loan transactions which you would be able to do. Like, for example, the lead banker in that case would be State Bank of India. Suppose, for example, I'm giving, would offering to a client about 2,000 crore loan for funding a project. Now, it's not like State Bank of India is offering them to this 2,000 crores from their coffers. It would be like State Bank of India would align with the 10 other banks and would say that, boss, I have a 2,000 crore client requirement. So why don't you take risk? So why don't you give me lend proportionate money? So some Canara Bank will say that I will give you 200 crore. Some other HDFC may say that I will give you 300 crore, and they will form a pool and they will offer loan to them. So these kind of transactions require a lot of documentation. So basically, in a banking and finance team, you will be doing documentation, protecting the rights. Vis-a-vis, Canara Bank will have its own legal team, SBI will have its own legal team vetting the documents, and other private bankers who are pitching in will have its own legal team. So you will be working in a law firm advising one of these clients on this syndicated loan transaction, or probably a securitization transaction, which is more complex. Like, once you have a pool of like 2,000 crore credit card pool of debt, what you would eventually do is like you have a securitization transaction where you can convert these loans into bonds and issue and sell it over the share market. So these kind of transactions require a lot of compliances, like statutory compliances, SEBI compliances, National Stock Exchange compliances, and all. So you will be basically looking after these compliances, whether your transaction is within law, whether this transaction, if challenged in court, what are the implications of that? How could you defend in that transaction? So these are basically kind of advisory kind of fraud. Now, so these people don't appear in court. That's why I want to caution firstly, these people don't appear in court. They will be simply sitting at their office and advising clients, but that is also a practice of law. That's an advisory service they are giving on the basis of their sanad. Now, another team is mergers and acquisition. The mergers and acquisition, like little bit of brief, that recent takeover of Air India by Tata. So there will be one team in Tata and one team in Air India, where both will be advising each other, like each client on the potential legal risk of this takeover. For example, they will conduct a legal audit on all the liabilities which Air India has. They will go to their Air India offices, or their, all the client, whoever the target company is going to acquire, they will go and sit at their office premises, take a look at all the legal documentation, agreements, litigation, demand notices from statutory and private personnel. Everything they would look, they will audit the risk, that this is the risk, and if you take over this company, this is the exposure in terms of liability you will get to know, and how the liability is, what is the risk assessment, in these type of cases you have this much of demand to be paid and all. So this is typically this is the kind of work you would do if you end up in a law firm in a mergers and acquisition. Likewise, capital markets. If you go into the capital markets team, basically you could find in Mumbai, mostly in Mumbai, you will find in Mumbai law firms. And Delhi also, there are a few law firms who specialize in capital markets, which basically they would do advising on listing agreements, on IPOs, that how to do up, because the capital markets, like if there is a little bit of disparity in compliance, it could end up in huge liability, because SEBI imposes huge liability. So it is necessary that you advise your client to avoid those risks. So basically you will be advising your clients to how to comply with SEBI guidelines, SEBI requirements, circulars, and all. So you will be privy to all types of listing kind of thing, how an IPO should be given, and you would be also contesting cases in that limited to stock exchange, because this is a very specialized subject. So not every lawyer could step in and argue on it. So there will be SEBI tribunals meant for this. So this team usually will be arguing cases before the court limited to the SEBI matters. Now, dispute resolution is a typical team that you could see in Kerala as well. Like dispute resolution is the litigation team. Now there is a bifurcation in the tier 1 law firm. There's an arbitration team as well as there is a normal litigation team. Even in major law firm, there is now a difference that the arbitration team itself is divided into two: arbitration and international arbitration team. The international arbitration, you know that the Kane Energy dispute, that the $1 billion liability is slapped upon the government of India. These are international arbitrations. Where Indian law firm, a Delhi-based law firm, only had appeared for Kane in that case. So these are the dispute resolution. You will get to do high-end litigations over there. Mostly these law firms charge very high hourly rates. They work on an hourly rate. So each associate will be working around 10 to 20,000 rupees per hour. So normally the client won't come to you with small matters in these type of law firms. So they would come to you if their case is complicated. Unless it is complicated, they won't come to you because they will go with another lawyer who would be able to do it. So complicated cases which require a team of lawyers to look into, they will come to you. So typically litigations that you get to do in law firms are high-end, very complex litigations. Now, so I'm not dealing much about the dispute resolution because you must already be privy on if you have done internship or throughout your studies. So now, if I go on briefing each department, it will be too much. Like, entire session would be taken by this briefing. So if you want to explain on any of these divisions, I can explain to you. If it is of some interest to you, I can explain any one. Otherwise, I would like to move to the next slide. Anybody wants to explain any of these departments? Anybody is keen to know? Or shall I move? Yeah.
Sir, it will be better if you can provide more information about dispute resolution.
Yeah, dispute resolution is typical litigation team only. So we appear in courts. I am in the dispute resolution team of Mulla and Mulla. At the same time, I also do transaction work also. But I am mainly a part of the dispute resolution team clubbed with shipping team because I work under a partner who is specialized in shipping. So I do shipping litigation as well as general litigation. Now, dispute resolution in my law firm, we don't have a specific division like arbitration team as well as litigation team. Our associates generally do both kind of litigation. Now, the litigation which generally you will get to see in my law firm, which I have gone through, is like disputes relating to pipeline or like subsea pipeline laying. Like, the petroleum product, there are ONGC rigs lying over there. These are like the transactions where, each vessel is engaged to do particular type of contract in offshore. So there are huge risk involved because, the work has to carry. I can't explain you on this call how these transactions looks like. It's very complicated. Even, now after like putting in 14 years, it's still complicated for me. But these kind of high-end litigations you will get to see in a law firm. Or if you end up in a Taiwan law firm, probably you will end up doing litigation in Singapore or in UK. In arbitrations, you will be sitting and doing, and you will be doing litigations in English law or under Singapore law as well. It's not necessary that you will be doing litigation under Indian law. Because now even in India, the Supreme Court says that if it's an international arbitration, you can subject it to a foreign law. So basically in these kind of arbitrations, you will be doing you will be arguing before the arbitrator a foreign law position. And if you have read CPC, if the foreign law is pleaded in Indian law, you have to plead it like a question of fact. So you have to bring an English lawyer, you have to examine him, you have to tell the judge about the law, and you have to argue on English law. So that kind of exposure, pretty wide exposure, you would get. This kind of normal litigation you won't get to see if you work in Kerala. I believe that you won't get to see these kind of litigation. So high-end litigation you will get to see. And one thing I must caution you, that typically in these law firms, that if you come with an idea that you will get to argue the cases before the court, then that's not correct, because because I had the same belief that I didn't have any idea about law firms when I joined it. I accidentally got into law firms, honestly. That I have no clue at all, because at that time it happened. I just applied, and a few people called me and got recruited into this law firm. So I got the impression that once I go over there, they will ask me to appear in court. They will give me matters to argue, but that it's not like that, because these transactions are high-end transactions, like above 100 crores. What minimum you may get is about 10 crores or something will be the minimum, the lowest state of litigation you would get in a law firm. So these law firms generally don't risk by giving their associates, because we would be generally doing, what we'll be doing is that we would be looking after law. We will be doing all kind of drafting, right from plain evidence, written submissions, everything we will be only drafting. And we will be settling those with the high-end senior counsel. You will get an opportunity to interact with Harish Salve, Mukul Rohtagi, all top-notch senior counsels, because they are the one who are arguing these cases. And if you are in a Mumbai-based law firm, you will get to almost all top-tier senior counsels in Mumbai. So basically, your job over in these law firms would be basically briefing the lawyers about their case, assisting them in the cases, this high-end transaction, because client now want you to appear in the matter, because they know your experience. You are under 10, under 5, so they don't want to argue your cases. So till I think at least you end up with the 10 years of experience in this kind of law firm, you will be just briefing the counsel. But some law firms are flexible. For example, I am permitted to argue for my clients in limited briefs. But the stakes are not much, like around 10 crores and all, I can argue. That's a flexibility that the client and the partner provides it. So that once you get that experience in law firm, then you sometimes feel confident in arguing the cases, and then your partner entrusts you, client gets confidence, and they entrust you matters. Otherwise, typically the law firms, they generally, because of the stakes are very high, they would you'll be remain as a briefing counsel. So that's a brief about dispute resolution. Any other teams anybody wants to know?
Sir, can you say about TMT?
Sir, can you please explain about insolvency and restructuring?
Sure. TMT is telecom, media, and technology. This is a very this is a team which deals with the 2G scam that had happened. So these are the teams basically advising on telecoms and technology companies on there are litigations before TRAI under telecom regulatory tribunals and all. So these are the specialized lawyers who will be advising on media sector, on technology sector, and on telecom sector. So I have not worked in this team, this is a limited overview I know about this team. So basically, this is a litigation-related profile, because you get to argue in court in relation to you get a lot of briefs to argue in TRAI matters. And again, the TRAI regulations are pretty strict. You end up paying hefty penalties. So this is a area which is a high-paying specialization. That you end up dealing with Google, Microsoft, and all top-notch clients you will be dealing with their issues, day-to-day issues, and all relating to different aspects. Like, for example, if you want to go and bid on a 4G, 3G, that each telecos will go and bid from the government. So you will be basically preparing bid documents for this company. You will be negotiating contracts. For example, if you the 2G scam is basically about taking the spectrum license from the government and subleasing it under the contract. So you will be making the sublease agreements as well. So not only making, you will be going there and negotiating the terms as well with your potential target, saying that they are sitting over a table, that you will be negotiating, basically saying that whether this term is acceptable. You will be how the negotiation usually happens. There will be a big PowerPoint presentation going on in the room, and then each term will be taken on the PowerPoint, and each parties would discuss what are the pitfalls of this, how this affect the transaction, and what are the alterations that needs to be brought in the terms and all. So each term of the contract you will be negotiating with the parties, because these are high-end contracts about 500,000 crores worth. So every minute aspects of the contract is introspected, examined by the lawyers on each side, and finally an agreement is reached. Now about insolvency and restructuring. This is a new practice which has come with insolvency and bankruptcy code. This is also because I also do insolvency practice as a part of dispute resolution team. So the insolvency practice in a litigation perspective, it is about appearing in National Company Law Tribunal and National Company Law Appellate Tribunals. Like insolvency, like under the Insolvency Act, as you know, under Section 8, Section 7, financial creditor, operational creditor, if a company now, as per the new amendment which has come in 2020, if a company defaults a debt of over 1 crore, you can go and initiate a case for bankruptcy, insolvency of that company in the National Company Law Tribunal. So once that insolvency process starts, there are a lot of things happening side by it. For example, once the company is insolvent, there will be a resolution professional appointed. A resolution professional then would appoint a lawyer to represent him. Then there will be a committee of creditors coming in who will be taking over the affairs of this committee. There will be another set of lawyers who will be advising on the committee of creditors. So these people will basically do how the structuring, how the company can be brought out of the debt, how the debt could be restructured, how the resolution plan, which is a plan basically required for the company to get out of the insolvency, an insolvency resolution process. So these companies will be basically doing this insolvency resolution process, restructuring of the debt. And finally, the most important part, whatever you do, this insolvency restructuring has to be convinced to the court, should be convincing to the court. So you have to make the restructuring in such a manner that finally that structuring would be approved by the National Company Law Tribunal and would stand the review of National Company Law Appellate Tribunal. So there are a lot of legal intricacies involved in this. So this is a brief overview of how the insolvency and restructuring department works. So probably anything else anybody is interested in out of these teams? Or should I get into next slide?
So can you explain about shipping?
Yeah, shipping team is basically, in Admiralty transaction, there are various kind of transactions where, one is the litigation-oriented shipping, which is Admiralty jurisdiction. As you see, once a ship is a floating territory, like it can go from one place to another. So basically, if you have a claim against a ship, a maritime claim against a ship or the owners of the ship, then that if, for example, a ship is located in Panama or it is registered, for example, in Singapore, and you have a claim against that ship, you will have to go to Singapore and litigate against the owners of the ship. So rather than that, there is an alternative to you, is that the ship would, whenever it comes to India, you could arrest the ship there and litigate it over there, because the property of that owner is now in India. Now you will invoke the Admiralty jurisdiction of the concerned port or concerned state where the ship is in. You would arrest the ship and ask him to pay your dues and go. So that is the litigation side of the shipping. And other thing that you will do in the transaction side is shipbuilding agreement. For example, if a company wants to build the ship, then there is something called shipbuilding agreement that you will liaise with the yards. So there are a lot of things to be done. This is a very complex transaction, because I work in the shipping team, under shipping partner. So I have also dealt with around like 12 vessels. I have negotiated and bought about 12 vessels. Made about shipbuilding contracts. So in these kind of contracts, you will be basically negotiating on the terms of shipbuilding, that the period within the ship is made, within which each stage of shipbuilding has to be completed. If the shipbuilding is not completed, what would be the penalty you have to pay? Because usually this kind of transaction is very high, like about one ship would cost you minimum of 100 crores. So each leg of transaction is very important, and sometimes when during the shipbuilding the yard will go bust, that yard would not have any money to build further ship, then how would you have spent so much of money, you have given 600 crores upfront, so how would you protect it? You may have to bring a bank guarantee in place, performance bank guarantee in place. So how would you structure the bank guarantee? So different kind of transactions you would do in a shipping department. That's a transaction side. Then ship finance department, if you want to buy a ship, you have to get money up from the bank. Then you will enter into ship finance transactions. So there are a lot of compliances to be done in terms of Merchant Shipping Act and all. So there are a lot of compliances how these transactions could be done. So basically, you will be ensuring that your transaction, your agreement is within the framework of law. Anything else? I think pretty much I have covered everything now.
Sir, so can
So
you
shall
hear
I
me?
move to the next slide? Or you want anything else?
Sir, I do
Okay.
have a question to ask.
Yeah, please.
So actually, what all kind of skills do we need to possess in order to be eligible to be a part of this law firm that you're speaking of, which you are
Let
also
me
a
come
part
to
of?
it. I'm dealing with it in the later point of my PowerPoint. So that's what I'm telling, that now the session is more important to you if we get on to the next stage. So I will give you tips how to get into and all. So let me move to the next slide then. See, now specifically, I think Kevin has asked this query, how to get into a law firm. So there are three typical ways you can get into a law firm. One is apply to these law firms directly seeking for recruitment, which is relatively the difficult part, but not so difficult also. Second is a campus recruitment part. And third is pre-placement offers, which is the easiest out of three. The pre-placement offer is after assessment of your performance during an internship. Now, how to apply to a law firm directly, that now, each law firms, the Bar Council had allowed them to have websites. So you have to choose your law firm and go to their career page, and there will be a portal to apply over there. So each law firms, you have to go there and upload your CV. So that's a very very competitive process, because law firms usually get a lot of applications. So it's one of the toughest path to get into a law firm is to apply directly and get into. And campus recruitment, yes, it is the easiest path, because they will come to your campus and recruit at least a few among you. So that you have to do is that you have to speak to the management. You can form a team within yourself. You can make a prospectus about your syllabus, that what the students are required to do over the syllabus, and make an impressive prospectus and send to these law firms and invite them to your college. So you have to ask your management to make appropriate funds for inviting the firms into your college. And each firms also have some stipulations. For example, some law firms, I know it personally, that some of our law schools had invited law firms, and they said that your syllabus won't suit with our requirement, what we require in law firms, so we are not ready to come and recruit from you. So it's basically a lot of factors depend upon your invitation, these law firms. But generally, you can try it out, or else what you can do is that I have seen that sometimes the law firm are averse to go to a new law college. They are not very aware of. So they are pretty averse to go there. But probably I have seen in my law firm that the people from law colleges apply in a bulk, that you shortlist 10 CVs and send it to law firm and say that I'm principal of so-and-so, or I'm the convener of a recruitment committee of so-and-so college. These are the best lot of CVs we have. Why don't you take one? So probably they will invite you for an interview, and they will pick. At least, if you can send 10 people, 10 CVs around, they will tell that, okay, 5, we have shortlisted 5 can come for interview, and they will pick 1 or 2 out of it. And third is the most easiest part, which is pre-placement offers, because internship is the easiest thing to get into a law firm. Like once you get into a law firm in internship, they will assess your work. Then they will assess your work and they like you. Then basically everything you have done in the law firm is over there. So it doesn't, because interview sometimes could be misleading, because interviews, it's just like a half an hour process. Some people may not be able to present their best side in an interview and may lose an interview. It's a lot of bargaining involved over there. But internship could allow you to bring the real potential in terms of work, because you're getting to work with them. So they are delegating you the work, and you can give that, this is what I am. Now you take it. So that also I will give you tips how to translate your internship into a career opportunity. Now, the most important thing to get into internship is to make a resume. So many resumes I have seen that some resumes I've found some glaring mistakes in the resumes, which was forwarded to me from Complete Lawyer team also. But I would generally tell you what you need to focus, because as a selector, when I see it for either for recruiting or internship, how I would generally do is that I would put five or four columns. Like I would generally, what I do is that I would put 4 columns, basically one for marks, and one for, I will put for moot courts, and I will put for articleship. He had written one for internships. I will put, and other column would be for extracurricular activities. So I will put marks on each column based on what you have written in the CV. So it's very important that some CVs I have not found marks at all. So when I assess that CV, if there is no marks, I can't put any marks over there. So you will lose out it for the fact that you have not mentioned your marks. And it will give you an adverse inference also. If you're not mentioning the marks, that means marks are not good. So that will make him think that, okay, fine, I'm not consulting the CV, because the marks are the only main gateway to assess your performance. Because if you have performed well in your curriculum, then that implies that you are going to perform well in the law firm also. So marks are an important factor. For never avoid putting marks. You can put the marks of all your semesters, and if you are in the first 10 in your class, or first 5, or a first rank holder, mention that in your CV that you are the first rank holder in this class. So that you need to specifically do, because once I get into a CV and see that he's a first rank holder of this in his class, or first rank holder in the university, I may not even look at the other sides. I would say he's a first rank holder. Why don't I give him a chance to work in my law firm? So my psychology works like that. So it's very necessary that you should mention this point. If you are in the first 5 or first 10, you should mention that fact because that would, if you have any disadvantage in the later sections, you don't have any moot court experience, you don't have any publication, probably that factor would mitigate all the rest of the factors. So that's very important that you put your marks, your status in the class. You have to put, again, moot court participation, very important, that if you have moot court participation, put that in your CV. If you have secured any prizes, put that in your CV. Wonderful. That you may not have good marks, but when I see that you have secured one of the prestigious moot court competition, I know this guy has stuff. Now, he may not be good in studying, but this guy has secured a JESUP moot court competition, or DM Harish moot court competition, or an academy moot court competition, or he is a semi-finalist in this competition. I know this guy has some merit, because he had gone up to that stage. So he knows he is good in his language and oratory skills. So I get some idea about the candidate. So put your moot court participation details. If you have published an article, put that in, because usually we don't get time to read articles. But once I see that your article is published in a well-known journal, then it is good that I will say, yes, this has not nice drafting skills at least. Or if I have time, I will read that article, or generally cursorily go through that article. So this is one good point that you can, if you have publications, mention that. Or if you don't have publication, try to publish. Try to publish in any forums you have. The LJRF offers you a platform. Try to publish 2-3 articles on the topic. So it will give an selector an impression that you are making efforts to further your career. Now, internship you have done, yes, of course, that if you have done, it's good that you put it. Now, showcase your extracurricular activities as well. This is not, usually many people think that extracurricular activities may not be so important, but it is important. Because if you are a karate black belt, mention that. Because that shows some kind of perseverance, like you have strived for something and you have achieved it. You are public speaking, you have won extempore competitions, public speaking, you have won prizes. So that shows some kind of metal, there is some stuff in you. So any of these factors could fetch you an internship offer, because it's very if you are too good in one of these sectors, I may overlook the other. I don't care that if you have won a JESUP moot court competition, I won't care what marks you have got in your class. I don't care, and I don't care what articles you got. He's a winner of JESUP moot court competition. That is enough for me. So like that, you have to think, sit, and emphasis on what needs to be given. And secondly, one thing I want to mention, that I have seen many people giving their photos in the CVs. It's not necessary that you should give your photo in the CV, but it's optional that if you want, you can give. But you should ensure that if you give a photo, that it should be on a formal dress. You can be in a casual dress, you should not give your photo on your CV. That creates a very bad impression on the selector. So that shows that you're not serious about the stuff, or either you don't know the stuff. So be sure that if your photo should be like a proper photo, should be very formally dressed, not like a regular, like a casual. Don't take a photo in a casual attire and put it on your CV. And it is not necessary also. You don't to put your photo on the CV. That you can avoid that also if you don't like. So it's up to you. It's completely optional. Now, how to convert your internships into an offer letter? I think it may be relevant to at least those who are interning with us right now. There are a few tips I'm telling which I observe, because I have recommended people who are interned with our firm for recruitment. So generally what I will tell you, people may have different types of standards, but I can only tell what my experience is. Now, first and important thing is be punctual at office. That you may find people who are not associates, maybe a little bit here and there in terms of timing, but there is a reason for it, because they are working late. So sometimes they have to sit late till 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. So in the morning, they may come a little late at 12 o'clock or maybe in the afternoon. But that has a reason, because they have put in their time in the firm. That's why they are coming late. But that is not an excuse for you to come after time. Like if there is a 10 o'clock standard time, try to be there 15 minutes earlier, because people will then notice you. Because once everybody comes, the interns are least noticed ones in the law firm. So unless there is some work, they will come and delegate you work and they will go. So you want to first, it's very important that you get yourself noticed in the law firm. It's very important as an intern. So first thing that you can do, be there early to the time, or at least be punctual. If there is a 10 o'clock time, you have to clock in to enter the firm, be there at 10 o'clock in the firm. Or if you can, be there 15 minutes early. It's going to benefit you, because you are making a mark. So sometimes some people come in and you see you, yeah, he's already there. So that itself creates an impression that he's serious about the stuff. Now, secondly, I generally observe that when we go to the work as interns, often get this problem that they will be dumped with so much of work. So many associates would come and give them work. So they will have at least 3 or 4 works always on their plate, and which would like make them say no to the work, or say that, sir, I have some other work. So that's a big turn. You don't know which associate is going to recommend you for recruitment. Probably some associate who had given your work may not be recommending you, but some associate who is going to recommend you for the work, recruitment, is coming and giving you the work, and you say no, then he's never going to come back to you, or he is never going to recommend you for recruitment. So, sorry. So tell yes to all the work. That whenever the associate comes to you and delegate you some work, tell that, yes, I am ready to do the work. And if you have to sit late to finish the work, sit late and finish the work. You have to take work home and do it at home. Do it at home and finish the work. And if you have some time compulsion, usually the law firms, they say that we need this work by end of this day, we need this work by afternoon. Then you tell them politely, sir, I have this many work, I have 4 works on my plate. Sir, I will certainly do your work, but can I do it after this work? I will certainly give you this. So that kind of polite thing. So the associate would get to know that you have so much of work. So let me do one thing, let me give it to some other person, or let me not bother you. So he will get a polite reply, but never say no to any work which is given to you by associate. Even if you are intending to get recruited, you finish it, sit at late and finish it. That would be my advice. Thirdly, it's the most important thing, because it has helped me to recommending one person for recruitment, because I found him that whatever research I give to him, he always give it to me in writing. That's most important, because I would tell somebody to do research, and he would often come and give me, sir, these are the case laws I have found in terms, and sir, these are the materials, these are the provisions of law I have found. And I said, oh, fine, very good, very good. He may even mention the paragraphs in the judgment, and he will go. But 3 days later, I won't remember that work. And after the end of the internship, even the intern who had worked on this may not remember that he had done this work. So it is always, whenever one associate gives you work, always do it in writing. That if he asks you to research on a particular thing, you mention that if you find 3 case laws, mention that 3 case laws, mention that 3 paragraphs in the case laws, which you have found relevant to the research he had given. And if you have any observation, you give it to that also in writing and submit to him, and keep the soft copy with you, so that you also know what you have done in the law firm. So there is some cogent, the tangible evidence that you have done something in the law firm. So keep that always, whatever the research work that is given to you or delegated to you by anybody in the law firm, do it in writing. Don't take confidential data. Don't do anything about the confidential stuff they have given. I'm talking only about the legal research aspect. So confidential data you're not supposed to take home. So anything about the facts, don't take home. Don't put it in writing without permission. Only the legal aspects of your work, you should put it in writing. Don't take any client data, because that would be counterproductive if you do it. Now, thirdly, try to interact with associates often, because you have to maintain your presence in the law firm. You have to make a mark over there. So it is very important that you interact. It's not like, you do your work and go. It's not like that. You have to interact. You have to go to associates and speak to them. Sir, I have this doubt. What should I do? That this is the thing in law. And whenever associates ask in a conversation, get into that conversation and talk to them often, so that they also know. Yeah, they may know that, because usually we don't remember the name of the associates also unless you interact with us often. So once you interact with us, I know this is this boy is good or this girl is good. So if you have any legal positions to tell, if you have an opinion about anything happening anything in news, discuss with them. It's a good thing. Try to interact with associates, senior associates often, so that they remember you. Now, if PPO, suppose after the end of the internship, suppose if a PPO is not given to you, nobody is suggesting or recommending your name for recruitment, then what you can do, probably it may not be the fault of the associate. Probably at that point in time, there may not be any seats available for recruitment. It is possible that you may do your internship, all things went right, but there is no vacancy at the law firm, so you are not able to convert your internship. What you can then do is that is where then the research work you have done in writing would come to your help. Because at that time, what you can do is that you can compile the research work you have done. You can make an application along with the CV and give it to the concerned partner who is in charge of recruitment, and give it to, sir, I have worked for 1 month in your firm. This is what the works I have done. Kindly do an assessment of the work, and if you have an opportunity, please delegate me. That itself will give you a good impression. Or probably at the moment you submit directly to that partner will, why don't I interview him right away? You sit and he will interview you right away. Possibility is there. And secondly, it also helps you in interview, because at that time where you have already submitted your work, he may be probably asking you questions from the research work you have done. So you have a limited scope to answer in an interview. So these are all the factors. These are all some tips that you need to be taken care while you're doing an internship, which would help you to convert your internship into a pre-placement offer. Now, what law firms are expecting from you? As a fresher, we are not expecting too much from any students. We are not asking him to be an expert in any aspects of law. What we are generally expecting from a lawyer is good command over English, both spoken and written, because it's very important that you will be sitting in a client meeting, you will be having a teleconference with clients, so you'll be speaking to the clients often, you'll be briefing counsels often. So it's very important that you have a good command over the language, because you are able to express yourself. So if you don't have, because basically we generally speak in our lingo, so we may have a good command in writing English, we may have good drafting skills, but often we lack is on our oratory skills. So we need to develop that spoken English. So watch English series and all. So that will help that to develop that spoken English kind of thing, because I generally found people from Kerala to be very good in terms of their legal acumen and all. What they lack is the spoken English. So that is an area which you need to develop if you want to end up in a law firm. Legal research skills, yes, obvious thing. Drafting skills, obvious thing. And thirdly, most important, that you need to demonstrate that you are a team player. Now, what does it mean that you need to be a team player? I will give you a very small tip. However frustrated you are while doing your work, never blame your team members for anything. Don't take out your frustration on any of your team members. Don't talk bad of them behind their back. If somebody comes to you and talking bad of them, never join in the conversation. So you don't know who is going to help you out. Maybe the person who is nasty with you may help you because he may be testing you. What is your temper? Because in a law firm, you are going to have a very strugglesome life. It's the salary which they give means that, you know, they are going to take everything out of you, that it's not so easy, that you have to work late. You have to, you may be pushed to do your best at all circumstances. So you need to, you will be tested in many ways. So always demonstrate these abilities, that if you don't have a good command over English, I know that everybody is good, but develop your spoken English skills, research skills, drafting skills, because it's very, because our profession is basically about how you express yourself. If you go to Supreme Court, that generally when we go to argue before the court, you will get 2 minutes or 1 minute time within which you have to tell a position of law which is appealing to the judge, saying that this is the question of law I want the court to address. You will get a 1 or 2 minutes, and if you are not able to convince the court within that 1 or 2 minutes, dismissed. Nothing is going to happen. So it is very important that you need to develop that oratory skills. So if you don't have, develop it over a period of time. Probably if you have good English skills, that would alone may fetch you a job, because interview, they will notice that. Now, let me give you a little bit brief about life in law firms. So it's very important that how a law firm life would look, generally the normal working hours start from 10:30 a.m. In time would be there. So some law firms it is 9 o'clock, some it is 10 o'clock. But generally it is 10:30 a.m. My law firm, it is 10:30 a.m. And there is no out time. It's until you finish your work. So whenever you finish the work, you can go out. It is not abnormal to stay until next morning. There have been instances for me, because now I have just briefed about the shipbuilding contract which I have done. Yes, when I was doing that transaction, I was sitting at office at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm working all throughout the night. And I'm keeping myself ready to go to and attend the negotiation at 10 o'clock in the morning, which is attended by a minister from China. So that type of rigor, you have to go through it. I hardly able to sleep around like 7 to 8 o'clock. After that, I'm preparing myself for the meeting, because before the meeting, I have to prepare my documentation well, because I need to speak, because I'm the project lead over there. I need to speak to all of the delegates over there. So you hardly will get any time. Probably if you are in the middle of the transaction, if you are in the middle of a high-end transaction, you will not, because you will be basically speaking with the delegates from foreign countries, and those people will be available in India for limited time. So you need to fulfill your transaction within that time. So basically, I remember in transactions where I have finally handshaked after the negotiation at 3 o'clock in the morning, because they have a flight to catch at 6 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning. They have to be off to the airport. So 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm handshaking with the client, closing a deal. So that type of rigor is there, but not always. Then you will have normal working days. But once the project is on, especially mergers and acquisition transaction, where the Air India takeover of Star, it's making news, but you may not know what the legal team over there, what the pressure the legal team over there may have went through, because this transaction has to be completed within a particular time, and you have to turn out your documentation before that. So that's a type of pressure that you have to go through. Not always, I'm not scaring you, but these type of work will be always there. So normal days, you will be able to finish it. If you have a regular working day, you will be able to finish your work around 8 o'clock in the night, and you can leave. So 10:30 to 8, you can take it as a normal working hours in the firm. It's not like 5 o'clock you can finish, close your file and go home. Never. I think 8 o'clock is a normal time. You will have to sit till 8 o'clock. If you are able to leave home by 7:30, you should consider leaving early from the office. That's the type of work you have to do. But don't worry, you will get a 1 month holiday. That generally, I work in the dispute resolution team. So whenever there is a summer vacation, we among our team would split, because there are summer courts also. So anything urgent comes in, so we have to work in. We have to move the vacation court. So we generally do is that we split among ourselves. We take 2 weeks leave in summer, and then there is a Diwali vacation, then there is a Christmas vacation. So I will decide that I will take Diwali vacation, you take Christmas vacation. So you arrange that way. So you'll get umpty number of leaves and all. That's not a problem. But when you are in transaction, it's the life is pretty tough. So if you want to get into a law firm, you need to be prepared for it. Now, good things in return. That if you the story that is a bit scary, I know, but it's okay that it's good that if you go through that type of rigor in the early stage of your career, because then everything become easy to you. Now you will get exposure to complex issues which you won't get to deal if you settle down in Kerala, probably. Complex issues in the sense that issues that you may not have even thought of. Firstly, I remember when I went to law firm that I joined them before getting my sanat only, because that time my examination was getting late. So I accidentally got recruited. Then Kerala University was not conducting examination. I told them that I will come by July. No sign of examination, no sign of viva, nothing. I got scared. So I told them this is the scene that there is no examination. So what should I? They said no, we don't wait for you. Who asked you to wait? Come, because we are not directly sending you to the court. You sit and understand the work. You work with us, and probably that would also help you, because if you are not good at work before your sanat only, we can clear you off. So they asked me to come. So I went there, and firstly I was sitting with the files. I know that it is English, but I am not able to understand anything out of it, because it's so complex, so terminologies. Each word I am going, what is demurrage, what is this term, and what is STC, like different terminologies they use. So it took me some time, around 6 months time, to understand these terminologies and first to make some sense of what I am reading. But I always put efforts to understand this, which was appreciated by my colleagues. This type of complex transactions you will get. So that type of transaction, and you will be working with big clients. You will be maybe end up working with celebrities. Maybe Salman Khan may one day come to you and say that I am doing a promo. This is the contract I have. Per day, my rate is 20 crores. So you have to make a contract with them. So if you are not able to do shoot on that day, that 20 crores they have to pay me, because I have spent my day. I'm idle. So like that. So you'll be getting to work, and IP contracts you will be making with singers, you will be making with production, and one day somebody will come to you and say that there is a launch of this film. I want to stay this film because this film is using my property, or defamation or amera. So you have to find an injunction suit. So you will get that type of exposure over there. Big litigations you will get to deal with. Deals which that make news, as I said, Air India deals and all the stuff that you will be in some transaction which makes the news in the newspaper, and you could be very proud reading that I am dealing with this transaction. And one thing most importantly, which would help you later if you want to go independent, because it may be difficult to work law firm for at least for a few to law firm forever, because this is very strugglesome life. So you will feel like at some point in time I have to go down and start for something for myself, which is a little bit relaxed. But at that time also I would definitely tell you that this is the one point you'll be pushed with no option but to perform at your best, because you are under tremendous pressure. You are always under threat of losing your job, and that would make you perform at your best. That would bring best out of you. That would like many times you would think that you won't be able to do it. For example, I would tell you that many occasions it had happened. So that I was sitting suddenly on a Sunday evening, and a call came in, tomorrow, Sandeep, tomorrow we have a matter in Delhi. You have to fly it down and you have to argue this matter, because our counsel presently arguing is busy in Supreme Court. So you have to go there. So suddenly I don't know nothing about the matter. There is a step in my, I have to read the file. I have to prepare myself on a Sunday evening. Sunday night, I have to catch the flight. Monday morning, I'm in court arguing the matter. So like that, you have no option, because if you go to the court without reading the file, you will look stupid. So you will burn your midnight oil, and you will learn your facts. So that is a kind of that you have no option but to perform. That was the kind of exposure you would get. And at the end of the day, as I told you at the beginning of the slide, good money. that everyone is assured of good money in return. So these are the brief things about law firms. I think I have taken more time. I am asked to do a presentation about 40 minutes now. It's just filled up over an hour. So I hope that the session is very interesting to you. You like the session. If you have any doubts, you can ask me. Or if you want to discuss anything, you can ask me.
Sir, I think Adarsh Sachdev of Government Law College, Ernakulam has a doubt. Adarsh? Adarsh Sachdev.
Yes, I'm present. First of all, sir, thank you for this session. It was a really informative session. Like we got a reality check as to how lawyers are. Like most of us are thinking that law, like entering into advocacy is easy. Like you gave us a harsh reality check. And my question was that, sir, I have heard from a friend that when you get into litigation regarding mergers and acquisition, you require a separate certification from the concerned authority. Is it true?
No, you don't require any certification. Maybe he's probably talking about the work that is done by the consultancy firm like Ernst & Young and Deloitte. Those are chartered accountants. There will be two firms which will be working parallel in these kind of big transactions. One is a consultancy firm, which would be advising on the viability of the project and all non-legal stuff. The legal stuff will be done by the lawyers. We only need LLB to do it. You don't need. There are courses which is given, which will give you an insight about how mergers and acquisition work. But you don't require any qualification other than LLB. You need to know about the law. It's the basic stuff you need to know about. The company law is the stuff that you need to know. If you are a company secretary, it will give you an idea about the compliances you need to know. So other than that, there's nothing you need to know. You for mergers and acquisition transaction, generally you need to be very good at Companies Act, and you need to be general overview about the labor laws and all, because when you like many times when the transaction happens, the transfer of employees happens. So you need to negotiate with them on the equality of payment, on the better terms of payment or something like that. So you need to generally know the law as a whole. But mergers and acquisition, basically, you need only LLB. It's not like you need any other qualification. But you have many courses if you are interested in that topic. There are many courses available in the market. You can do it. In fact, I have also done one course in mergers and acquisition, but honestly, it didn't help me in any of the transaction. So there is no point in, because practice is completely different from theory. So once you get into it, the questions, everything I'm dealing with, new question of law. So everything every day I'm a student, I'm learning law. And the practice is completely different. You have to get into that, then only you will learn the law. And mergers and acquisition, I may not be also right person to advise you, because I have only done with the litigatory part of it. My job was limited to appearing in the court in the mergers and acquisition and obtaining a sanction from the court on the merger. At that time, when I appeared, it was High Court was having the power to approve the mergers and acquisition scheme. So I appeared in cases where there were mergers and acquisition needs to be approved by the High Court. So basically, my job was limited to establishing that all the compliances have been done and the mergers and acquisition is within the law and court should approve it. Anything else?
Nothing, sir. I heard that it's highly lucrative. That's why I asked.
Yeah, don't worry. I think whatever I have told you just now, whatever thing, you just need LLB to get into and do it.
Thank you, Adarsh. I think Abhirami from Government Law College, Kozhikode have a question to ask. Abhirami?
First of all, thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful section. Sorry, sir, for not turning on my camera since I am having a poor network connection here. So I'll be representing my team, and the doubts are proposed by myself and my co-interns. So the first question is, sir, like we are going to end our course soon, so we are in a confusion what to do next. So is it advised to do specialization in any particular subject before moving to the practice, or enter into the law firm right after the course, sir?
See, any additional course is advantageous. There's nothing like you have to do one particular course to get into a law firm. There's nothing. You just need an LLB, and good marks in LLB could fetch you an opportunity with a law firm. If you're not able to get in a tier 1 or tier 2 law firms, as I've shown you, you can. It's very important that you should start your work. So if you are ending up in a small law firm which may not offer you that lucrative salary that I shown you right away, it's not important, because if you have a base, you will end up in a tier 1 law firm. So what is important is to get into practice. It's not about learning too many courses, getting into too many courses. What is important if you want to get recruited is your experience. Once you have practice, because we generally as lawyers believe that the courses are not important, because that would only give you a brief overview about the law. Once you get into it, you're not, the client would never come and ask you what is the basic facts, what is written in the statute. Client will never ask you. Client would come and ask you that I have this kind of problem, what should I do? So probably your question would be, your answer would not be directly, you have a particular section saying that this can be done. No, not like that. You would be interpreting that section, you will be going into case laws of that section, and you will be giving an advice. Probably sometimes it may end up like you won't be able to give an advice, because it's in a gray area, that there are high court decisions. Madras High Court had said one thing, Bombay High Court said, and Delhi High Court said another thing, and it may be under review of the Supreme Court. So like that, situations may come also. I think that courses will not offer you, because it will just give you a brief idea. There's nothing wrong in doing courses, because I myself had done 3 courses. I have done PG diploma from Nalsar in media law, diploma in cyber laws, diploma in mergers and acquisitions, and so on and so forth. But honestly, in my experience, that course has never helped me in any of my job, actually.
Okay, sir. Also, sir,
But
like
it's
what are
always
the
good that you, if you have time, that sometimes like if you do practice, if you get time, because these courses are good, that it will give you an idea about the legal side, legal aspects of it. So there's nothing wrong in doing it, and it's also good in the sense that you have more things to write in your CV. So it's that way it is good that you can write that you are so and so, so and so, and probably when you go to a law firm, they will give you an additional task also explaining you why you have taken this course. And also it may help you sometimes if you want to apply into a mergers and acquisition team. They have some vacancy in mergers and acquisition. If you go over there, the mergers and acquisition team, in my experience, would never look at your course strategy. What they would know if you have done any mergers and acquisition in practice stage. So that is what they want, because course you won't study anything, because the practice life is entirely different from what you study.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Also, like, what are the exposure of a legal advisor in a NBFC, sir?
NBFC, legal advisor in an NBFC. I am not very sure, because I have never worked in an NBFC.
Okay,
I have attended cases of NBFCs. We have
Yes,
a
sir.
few cases of NBFCs. Basically, if you work in an in-house role, what I know, I may not be a right person to advise it. I have a limited exposure in-house, but I may not be a right kind of person. But I found an in-house role, you may not get that exposure in the legal side. What you will be doing in the managerial side of law, that the business would come up with some problem. You have to find the right kind of advocate who would give you a solution. So you would be basically working as an interface between the business and the lawyer. So in-house, I don't think that, unless there is something very specific compliance that in-house team like ICICI and all, they have a very expert legal team, which I know that they advise on the transactions and all. So unless you end up in such kind of in-house team, generally in-house teams generally liaise with the lawyers, take inputs from the lawyers and communicate to the business.
Okay, sir.
So,
Sir, also like we have heard about all those LLM courses in arbitration, which is actually offered in the universities, which is in abroad. So, sir, whether these LLM courses help to get a job in India if you graduate from abroad?
As I told you that LLM courses, if you take it, there is it's not about specialization. If you do LLM, it is my experience is like that. It's about the college which you do LLM. The random LLM anybody can do from any colleges. There are a lot of colleges offering LLMs. So it doesn't matter that if you end up in some small law colleges and do your LLM and spend your money in foreign LLMs or even in India. If you take LLM from any prestigious universities like Oxford or Cambridge or London School of Economics or University College London or King's College, it may help you because your CV it may look good. Because these law firms also when they go for usually when the foreign law firms come to us in a very high stake project, what they would ask is submit your CVs of the team. So every team member has to submit his CV, a brief account of what is experience inside the law firm and what a brief account of his qualification. So the law firm generally find that when an English law firm comes to you, that if you are an English qualified lawyer, that if you have done LLM from Cambridge or Oxford, that will give you an advantage to relate, because they can relate. Yes, he is done from Oxford. This is near to this is in well reputed over here. Rather than if you mention government law college over here anywhere, they may not be able to relate to you. So in that sense, it may help you, but it's not of much importance. According to me, I have went and done LLM from University College London with the expectation that it would help me to fetch a job. But honestly, in my experience, it didn't help me that much. But definitely, I have seen all throughout when I was working in the law firm, when I am working in the team. That my CVs look very attractive to the foreign law firms. That I have seen, but otherwise I have never seen that LLMs make any sense or specialization make any sense.
Okay, sir. That's all, sir. Thank you so much for clarifying all our doubts. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, I think Fida bint Anas of Al-Azhar College have a question. Fida? So I think Fida have a technical issue. I think Abraham Worky of Government Law College, Ernakulam have a doubt.
Good evening, sir. Moving directly. So my question is, does your firm generally do pro bono service, or do generally law firms do such services?
Yeah, pro bono services they do. It's not like they won't do. We do pro bono service. It's not so much of pro bono, because pro bono is always lawyers like to do, but law firms generally don't do pro bono that much. But generally, you get to do pro bono work, but not much. I have not done any pro bono that much, but I know some law firms do it as a part of their corporate responsibility. But
Okay.
because you generally, I said, especially in Tier 1 and Tier 2 law firms, you may not get that much opportunity because they're paying you a huge amount. So they expect you to also serve the client in that way so that your salary is justified.
Okay,
Salary
sir.
in the
So-
terms of retainership fees, I mean. So it's
connecting
basically
with that,
corporate stuff. Even if you end up in this corporate law firm, you won't even take cases from individual cases. For example, if somebody is coming to you with a family case, you would say, no, I can't deal with it. Or a settlement issue, they would say, I won't deal with it. Because generally we advise on corporate clients. So that's the thing. Mostly 99% you will get corporate clients. Or if you have individual clients, that would be like high stakes celebrities like Lata Mangeshkar or somebody like that. Like very high-end celebrities would come to. Otherwise, law firms, generally individual cannot afford a law firm. The fees is very high. So you will never come to, as an individual, you will never come to a law firm. The fees is very high. So generally only the corporates also would come to you with a complex matter. Okay? They will never come to you with a simple matter also.
Okay, sir. I asked only because I saw that matter in a film. So, and do you get to choose or reject a case, or if not, who does in a law firm?
No, you won't get. Your partner would definitely get a chance, but you won't get it. Whatever your partner will be, basically your reporting partner is the decision maker on terms of which clients he wants to choose. So basically, he would give you the case. You have no alternative but to work on that case. At least in my law firm, I don't know about other law firms. So it's the reject the cases is the option only. The privilege is only left with the person who brings in the matter.
Okay, sir. Then concerning beginner associates, is there a bond for service, labor bond or something?
No, some law firms has actually. There is a bond in the sense that if you breach it, then a part of your salary will go into that bond. But not with us. My law firm doesn't have, and most of the law firm does not have. Some law firms has, which I know, but most of the law firm doesn't have that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Because there is no point in asking you to work if you don't want, because that is a type of work we deal with. If you're not ready to work it, then better you go.
Okay, sir. Oh, I asked just because you're already paying a huge sum of salary in the beginning itself. So I thought there might be something to retain the person there. That's why.
I see. It's not about that. Generally, getting into is a very difficult job. Actually, getting into law firm is because not because of something special about it, but because of the less number of vacancies in Tier 1 and Tier 2 law firms. There are a few law firms, and a lot of students are getting passed out every year. So there are a few positions available in law firms. So there is a huge competition. And firstly, national law schools will come in. National Law School of Bangalore is there. So Tier 1 law firms, mostly you will see the people from national law schools, they go and recruit over there. So these kind of people generally offer nice salaries to them. So once you get into a law firm from direct recruitment, you will be working with them. So you won't be offered anything less to what they are getting. So that way you are getting high end salary. So it's not about nothing about bond or anything. So, and secondly, you will get to know also this is not big money for the law firm because they are also getting big money out of you.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir, I think Joseph Stephen of CSI Institute of Legal Studies have a question to ask. Joseph? Joseph, I think he have a network issue. So thank you, sir, for clearing our doubts and confusions about our careers and your valuable tips. Moving on, sir. A grateful heart as a magnet for miracles. Now, I call upon Azra Fatima of Campus Law Center, University of Delhi, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. It's a matter of pride for me that I got chance to thank everyone present here. I take this opportunity to thank the respected speaker, Advocate Sandeep sir, for attending this session and sharing insight and wisdom with all of us. We will cultivate the advice you gave us in real life. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. I thereby sincerely thanks our coordinator, Advocate Nelima ma'am, for effortlessly arranging such informative session, which is really helpful for all of us. Thank you, ma'am. I thanks all the participants wholeheartedly for glorifying this event with your presence. Thank you, everyone. Last but not the least, I would like to thank our team member. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Azra. Everything have an ending, but always remember, in life, every ending has a new beginning. With this quote, we will end our session. Once again, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your cooperation and your valuable time. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your valuable tips. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.